In today's episode, James Comey and Letitia James may be indicted in the coming days. This comes as MSNBC claims there's no evidence to do so. Also, more details have been released about who the shooter actually was earlier today that shot up the ICE detention facility, leaving one person dead. In both these stories, I'll show you what both sides are saying and then give you the bottom line.
Brett, good evening. We're told a grand jury in Virginia is looking at evidence relating to allegations that former FBI Director James Comey may have lied to Congress on September 30th, 2020. That date is very specific because the statute of limitations for lying before Congress is typically 5 years. Next Tuesday marks exactly 5 years since his remote testimony. He was in Virginia at the time. It was during the throes of COVID. It's unclear if a grand jury will vote to indict Comey. The grand jury has the option to say yes or no to an indictment. To be clear, as we speak, Brett, he's not been indicted and he's not facing charges at this moment. This is all up to a grand jury. This latest development comes just days after President Trump publicly pressured Attorney General Pam Bondi to move forward with charges against Comey, Senator Adam Schiff, and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Schiff and James were mentioned by Trump for unrelated mortgage fraud allegations. They also have not been charged at this moment. Trump then went on to suggest that Bondi appoint Lindsay Halligan, his former personal attorney, to become the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. On Friday, Eric Siebert resigned from that post under pressure from the administration. And on Monday, just a few days later, Lindsay Halligan was sworn in. The Justice Department is declining comment on anything related to this overall probe, as is the FBI. Brett, we've reached out to James Comey's attorney, but have not yet heard back.
Okay, so bottom line up front, the DOJ is experiencing something called the statute of limitations, meaning they have until September 30th to indict the former FBI Director James Comey, because we know that he did commit perjury. And how do we know that? All you have to do is just look at the clips and then look at the evidence that ended up being released thanks to Tulsi Gabbard. And that's why this needs to happen. Because we know if it was the other way around, not only would the Democrats have put a committee together like they did with January 6th, but they would have already landed indictments. And we've seen what they did with the former president over the last 4 years. So why don't we take a look at one of the clips just to prove my point, and you make up your mind. Take a listen.
Do you stand by your House testimony on March 20th that there was no surveillance of the Trump campaign that you're aware of?
Correct.
You would know about it if they were, is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Now, that is one of a series of statements made by the FBI director that Republicans, particularly President Trump, believes he lied about. Now, remember, he signed off on the FISA warrant where they were allowed to run surveillance on the Trump campaign based on what? A document that was fraudulent, okay? Based on fraudulent intelligence. So for him to say that in front of Congress, the president thinks he's lying. He was made aware of that. And he's not the only one. Here is Peter Navarro, who went on to CNN just earlier, a couple hours ago, to talk about this. He says that James Comey, no question, committed crimes. Take a listen.
We now are learning that this attorney that was installed by President Trump after the Eastern District of New York was not going to pursue an indictment against Comey. The president puts in his person and suddenly they're going to pursue it. That's okay with you? Considering your experience?
I have been saying consistently since at least 2021 that Comey, Clapper, Page, Strzok, all of the FBI, Schiff, among others, should be investigated for crimes that they committed. They broke the law. Nobody disputes that Comey lied. He lied to Congress. He leaked. That's all true. He signed those FISA warrants. I got to emphasize to your viewers, okay, look, CNN is not going to be receptive to this kind of thing, but the Russia hoax was a hoax. We know that. And Comey was the guy who set all of that in motion with the help of the FBI agent who put me in leg irons. I mean, imagine that, Casey. They put me in leg irons when all they had to do was call me on the phone. Was that not partisan circus arrest? So Comey, there's just a long list of people.
Books, sir. I'm not.
What's that?
I'm just here to talk to you about your book.
I just can't help but notice how Casey Hunt had to cut him off because she knew he was telling the truth in that moment. I mean, they really don't like it when people who are from the right go onto these networks and start saying their piece. They always want to cut us off. I find that to be interesting. But anyways, the other thing that James Comey has to worry about is the fact that Andrew McCabe contradicts his testimony that the FBI never leaked any information to the media. According to Andrew McCabe, he actually got an approval from James Comey to disclose some of this information about the Russia hoax, etc., to the media. In other words, he was allowed to leak it, and James Comey knew about it. And so that's another thing that they're trying to get him on, because we know that all of this was used to impeach the president, not once, but twice. Now, if you were to listen to CNN, particularly Caitlin Collins, she says that there is no evidence. Take a listen.
You said that the issue that President Trump had was that Eric Siebert, the former U.S. attorney, wasn't bringing the charges against his political enemies fast enough. Isn't it more accurate to say that he didn't find evidence that justified any sort of criminal prosecution after 5 months of looking into it? And then that was a problem for the president, because he wants a prosecution, he wants an indictment, and it almost doesn't even matter what the charges are.
Well, that's our understanding with Letitia James. Obviously, with James Comey, it remains to be seen what exactly this is going to look like. He had not brought charges while he was in there, Jake. He'd been there since May, and so that seems to speak for itself.
This is very important for me, okay? Let me just ask you this. How many times have you received spam calls, spam text messages? And you're sitting there wondering, how did they get my information? Well, they got it because your personal information is being sold on the dark web. And I'm talking about your name, your email address, your mailing address, even your social security number. My wife and I were plagued with spam calls. And this is why today's video is sponsored by Aura. Aura helped us clean up our data, get it removed, stop the spam calls. It's dangerous out there, and we know the federal government isn't going to protect us. So we have to protect ourselves. That's why you have to use Aura. And not only will they get you to see what information has been sold or leaked on the internet, but they'll help you remove it and offer 24/7 monitoring. Try Aura today for free for the first 14 days by going to aura.com/Devory or click the link in the description below. You have to protect your personal data because no one else will do it for you. Again, that is aura.com/Devory. Yeah, see, it's very subtle how they speak and mislead their audience. As you guys heard, there was nothing there for Letitia James. She didn't commit any crimes. There's no evidence. That's what they want people to believe. And the only reason why I'm pressing this point here is because I'm using the same logic she used against Donald Trump at the time. I mean, what evidence did they really have to go after him in the way that they did that delivered almost a $600 million fine for falsifying business records? I mean, that's unheard of. And even if it was true, we know the $600 million was ridiculous. That's why the appellate court threw it out. So I don't feel sorry for Letitia James. And I think this is the bed that Democrats made for themselves. And so they have to sleep in it. Now, speaking of that bed that Democrats are making, we go to our next update. Now we know who the shooter was earlier today in Dallas, who shot up the ICE detention facility, leading to one person dead and 2 injured. Here's what he looks like, and here's what his name is. Take a look.
All right, we start off with yet another Antifa-style radical left-wing shooting, this one in Texas very early this morning, 6:40 a.m. local time. The FBI says 29-year-old Joshua John opened fire on an ICE facility in Dallas in the darkness of the pre-dawn hours, the shooting about 40 minutes before the sun came up. And John actually shot 3 illegal migrants that were riding in an ICE van, killing one, critically injuring 2 others. And then this ridiculous person shot himself in the head after such a failure as his last move to get out of this world. The FBI Director Kash Patel posting this photo of his ammunition on a nearby rooftop, anti-ICE. He did not hit one person who works for ICE. He hit 3 migrants. The deranged left, violent yet again, motivated by the insane rhetoric that is coming from their leaders.
And this takes us to what the president had to say about this crazy attack. He says that he was briefed on the deadly shooting at the ICE field office in Dallas, Texas. It has now been revealed that the deranged shooter wrote anti-ICE on his shell casings. This is despicable. The brave men and women of ICE are just trying to do their jobs and remove the worst of the worst criminals out of our country. And he goes on and on and on about how the rhetoric against ICE is causing their lives to be in danger. And then you get just to the bottom line here, because I like to give it to you guys straight. I'm calling on all Democrats to stop this rhetoric against ICE and America's law enforcement right now. The Trump administration is fully committed to backing law enforcement, strong borders, securing our homeland, deporting violent illegal criminals, and fully rooting out the left-wing domestic terrorism that is terrorizing our country. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, the unfortunate part is a part of this country continues to eat up the lies from MSDNC, and I'm about to show you a clip for them, because when you listen to this, it kind of makes you think, do they even recognize how bad the political rhetoric is? In fact, they go as far as to question the motive of the shooter, even though the evidence literally tells us what this is about. Take a listen.
The fact that they hinted at a potential motivation here with the etchings on the round saying, quote, anti-ICE in nature. And of course, the motivation is being investigated, and this is very early in the investigation. But the fact that there is this call for the division to stop, for the rhetoric to be tempered down, for the rhetoric to be dialed down, multiple officials mentioned that, including the official from the ICE office in Dallas saying, quote, the rhetoric has to stop. Texas Senator Ted Cruz mentioned it also, saying that politically motivated violence is wrong and that, quote, demonizing ICE must stop. So we heard that over and over and over and over again. And it stood out to me, obviously, because we have seen just the rhetoric escalate. We've also seen the very dramatic videos of ICE nabbing individuals and tossing them into unmarked vehicles. A lot of these ICE agents have been masked, and so it has been very divisive. And there's been a lot of fear in the different communities where we've been reporting. And so the call for the decrease in that division and the rhetoric is what really stood out.
Yeah, I just find it so disgusting that if you listen to MSNBC, they sound more sympathetic towards people who are not even victims, by the way, but people who cross the border illegally. They sound more sympathetic to the shooter in this situation than they do to the actual victims, which just so happens to be, if you want to talk about irony, the victims in the shooting are migrants themselves. So you had a radical left lunatic shoot up an ICE detention facility and kill a migrant in this entire process. How does that make sense? But they don't believe the political rhetoric is a problem. In fact, they go so as far to say that even if the political rhetoric was toned down, that still wouldn't be enough. We would still have violence in the streets like this. Take a listen.
In this case, politically motivated. And the politically motivated ones, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because conditions have been set that people start acting out against.
What are the conditions?
So, distrust in institutions, that's been building for quite some time. Attacks on institutions, the wealth gap, oppressive policies, at least this is what people perceive, and then the militarization of ICE and other federal law enforcement, the wearing of the mask, the aggressive tactics. So the people who are starting to act out against this feel it's their only recourse. Again, this is predictable. We see this happening throughout our history and in other places as well. So, we can tone down the rhetoric, and that's the right message. But you also have to start looking at what policies you've implemented, what tactics you're using, because if you tone down the rhetoric, but you leave those other pieces in place, nothing's going to change.
So I mean, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like they're not interested in toning down the political rhetoric. They don't think that's going to make a difference. They believe it comes down to policy. So what you're saying is that when the federal government is doing their job, whether we disagree with the policies or not, the fact that they're doing these policies, that's why people are getting violent. I mean, they must think we're that stupid. I just don't believe that. I believe it starts with rhetoric because those are ideas. We think from our ideas. And those ideas, when we emotionally accept them, they turn into action, okay? Now, Joshua John, which is the man who carried out this deadly shooting on an ICE detention facility in Dallas, left behind a literal anti-ICE message on a rifle. We all know what it said. And what type of family does he come from? Well, according to what people are saying here on social media, it comes from a liberal, biracial family in Fairview, Texas. His mother is critical of the gun laws in her state. And his sister is a woke woman who was a supporter of Beto, which we know lost that election for the governorship. And I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about this individual. We just got to continue to pray for our country, no question about it. But more importantly, we have to get people to understand, and I don't know how we do that. I honestly don't know how, except set the example that this type of rhetoric is not conducive to a society that wants peace. I mean, I think that's just the bottom line. Now, here's what the governor of Texas had to say.
All of that is true, Governor. At the same time, I do think there is a real question and a real appetite out there for people to now get to the bottom of what is creating these formal structures to the extent that they exist. President Trump has designated Antifa a terrorist organization. There are questions about, for example, the ICE attack in Texas at this Alvarado facility just 2 months ago and how organized that group of would-be assassins was. What do you know at this point about what went down today? Anything about organization, infrastructure, coordination, communication, funding?
All those items you just mentioned are, I am told, are being looked into for the reasons you're talking about. And what I'd like to do is trace it back even further than this, because I can tell you remember the time of the George Floyd protest, where arrests were made across the entire state of Texas, and many of those protesters who were arrested were paid protesters. Here's the point. You may remember it was about a year ago, there were protests on college campuses, including in Austin, Texas, where arrests were made. Most of the arrests were not of students. They were of paid protesters, and some of the paid protesters arrested on the UT campus at that time were arrested in the earlier protests, in the George Floyd protest.
Yeah, see, the governor points out something that is truly disturbing. So the act itself, when we're talking about political violence, is already crazy, right? But what's crazier is the people funding this stuff, because the money has to come from somewhere, okay? Somebody is funding these protests. And in these protests are people who are agitators. And when you have that on a repetitive basis, someone's finally going to commit violence. We saw it in Los Angeles. And I really do hope the Department of Justice, if they truly want the highest credibility possible in this climate, they got to find out who's actually funding this and bring them to justice. We have people literally paying for violence to occur on our streets, on our soil, and people do lose their lives in the process. It's insane. Now, just to show you that it's not my opinion, I'll just show you what Democrats have been saying about ICE officials for quite some time now, and I think you could put the two to two together and how that rhetoric has been leading to violence. Take a listen.
This is Gestapo-like behavior. Plainclothes officers wearing masks are terrorizing immigrants.
The ICE issue is alarming beyond words. Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process. We're being hyperbolic. If you're a black and brown community, it's here. Wake up.
Dangers that we saw in Nazi Germany, especially in the earliest days of Nazi Germany, are the dangers that we need to react to now. They're taking people off the streets and sending them away. It's a 5-alarm fire, everyone.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that. This is not the 1930s, and every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye. Just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
Okay, here's the bottom line. I would actually have some level of sympathy, or I'd be willing to listen to Democrats if they would just shoot it straight. I mean, keep the same energy regardless of the source. Meaning what? Why don't you guys feel that way about the American citizens who were murdered by criminal illegal aliens? You don't ever hear them riot over that. You never hear them hold a press conference over that. You never see them invite the parents or the family members who were impacted by illegal migration and how it took a loved one away. They don't do any of that. In fact, they would rather fly into another country like we've seen and fight for illegal aliens who are criminals. So that's why I just don't buy anything that they say. This whole rhetoric they're using, we know it's a certain messaging tactic because they want to scare their base, and that's how they get them to do what they want them to do. And that's the unfortunate part about politics. All right, so answer this question for me in the comments section below. What do you think must be done to not only get the rhetoric to be toned down, but to prevent further political violence from happening in our country? I don't think we can erase it entirely, but I think we can minimize it. It's continuing to accelerate at this point, so we have to do something. Let me know if you were in charge. What would you do? Put your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, so in our next video, liberal women are attempting to rebuke the president by consuming more Tylenol pills. This comes as RFK Jr. and the president has linked Tylenol to autism. Also, Jimmy Kimmel offered up a terrible apology, if that's what you want to call it, last night. So if you guys missed out on those updates and more, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.